All right. Well, first of all, good evening, everybody. My name is Rick Rodriguez. I am an instructor over at 4Geeks Academy, and wanted to thank you for coming to work with me with Python and generating a simple excuse generator on the command line. Before I go ahead and give you a little bit more of an introduction about myself, let me go ahead and talk a little bit about 4Geeks Academy, who is being generous enough to give me an opportunity to present this little workshop. Um, 4Geeks Academy is a coding boot camp in Miami, Florida, uh, but they do offer uh, their academy to internationally, and they offer full stack software development as well as data science and machine learning programs. Their programs are part time and online, so all students also get unlimited one on one mentoring sessions, unlimited group mentoring, and access to our Slack channel that has over 4,000 developers and unlimited career support, including resume reviews, LinkedIn reviews, GitHub help, mock interviews, and much, much more. 4Geeks Academy does offer different scholarships that are available. And if you have any questions or you want more information, you can contact the admissions team by phone or by text at the number 786 416 6640. Okay. And that's a little bit about 4Geeks. Let me tell you a little bit about myself now. Yeah, like I said, my name is Rick Rodriguez. I am an instructor at 4Geeks Academy. I teach the full stack web development program. I'm one of the instructors, that is one of my jobs. This is my side gig, right? This is where the stuff that I like to do with the adults. During the day, I also teach in public education, and right now I'm actually starting the new year. So it's a very exciting time. It's a very busy time, but that's what I like to do. I like to teach, and it doesn't age does not matter with me. I've taught children, I teach adults, and they all bring their benefits, and I learn a lot from them. And I hope that I, in turn, uh, give them information that helps them to grow as well. I've been teaching at 4Geeks for since September of last year, so I'm fast approaching 1 year with 4Geeks, and I hope to do uh, more teaching with them in more cohorts in the future. So we can go ahead and get started with what we came here to do, which was learning how to generate an excuse generator with Python. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my screens here, screen sharing. And feel free to, send a message via the chat and just use that as like kind of like a parking lot. I will get to the messages eventually, but make sure to post the messages on the screen. And that's once we're done with the presentation and we've done, some practice with it, then I will gladly go ahead and answer any and all questions that you have. Okay, sounds good. All right, let's get started. All right. So the first thing we're going to want to need to do is have some sort of uh, developer environment for us to go ahead and work with Python. If you have the ability to work with Python locally on your computer, you're more than welcome to use that. But if you don't, or you're not sure if this is your first time, you can find a Python IDE online. Just go on to Google and just run a Google search. You can just do Python Online IDE. Generally, one of the first entries are usually the best ones there. So I have the first one on here, which is online-python.com, which I found to be very helpful and it will accomplish everything that we're going to do tonight. So once you get on there, and I'm going to go ahead and provide the link as well. It's good to do a Google search for it. All right, so once we have that, you should have something like this on the screen. You may have some code already presented on the screen, which is perfectly fine. You can go ahead and erase all that. We're going to start from scratch here. And just to give you a brief idea of what's being presented in front of you on this IDE, you have the main Python file that we're going to be typing our code above. And on the bottom half, you're going to have the terminal, which will be displaying your whatever output you want on the screen. So now that we have that up, and by the way, if you don't have it up yet, just send a message on the chat and I'll give you an opportunity to do it. All right. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and talk about what we're going to cover today. We're going to be generating excuses through Python, and we're going to be generating them in different ways. All right, so we're going to be generating them where we're running the Python code each time and generating a single excuse. And then we're going to go a little bit more advanced and we're going to generate multiple excuses on the terminal. So we got to go ahead and talk about what we're going to be covering today in order to accomplish that. So let's do that. First things first, we're going to be dealing with what we call the random, the random module. We're going to be covering lists today. We're going to be covering string concatenation. We're going to be talking about appending today. We're going to be talking about functions. What else are we going to be talking about? For loops. And I think that's going to be pretty much everything that we're going to be covering today. This is a very basic setup. So if you have programmed before in another language, such as, let's say, JavaScript, a lot of this is going to be very familiar with you. Okay, and that's good because what you should get out of this is having an understanding that the languages that you're working on in 4Geeks or in your class or for self-development, they do have very similar ideas. Just syntactically, they'll be written differently, but the ideas are the same. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about each of these things that we're going to be covering so that you have a better idea of why we're going to be using these specific topics here. So let's start with random module. So if you've ever used JavaScript, we like to use math.random, which is very, very familiar, or very kind of similar to the random module here. If you thought about like flipping a coin or rolling a die, you can imagine that that is how the random module helps you. It randomly will draw something for you, randomly create something for you, such as a number, or it can randomly select something for you. So it will give you random numbers, it will shuffle things for you, it will choose things for you in a random order. And so, for example, when you need to pick a number, let's say, a choice from a list, or creating a random event, right? You can ask your friend, let's say random, right, to help you out with this. That would be the random module. And this can be very useful. You can use the random module for things like creating games, maybe for generating random messages, or you can make it for making decisions in your programs. Okay, so the random module allows you to do what we call generate random or pseudo-random numbers. Okay. Lists. From lists, you can think of lists kind of like an array. Right? So let's say let's pretend you have like a box of different candies, right? And you want to grab one candy without looking, right? If we go ahead and we use random on our list, right? We think of it as kind of like closing your eyes and selecting one of those candies without looking. So we're going to be using random on our lists. Think of a list as kind of like an array, right? And that randomness is going to allow us to randomly pick one of those candies out of our group. Okay, so a list, you can think of a list as kind of like a grouping, right? We have groupings, and we use what we call brackets, right? So brackets are these things right here, and within those brackets we put what's inside elements or items. Okay, and elements can be anything. Elements can be strings. We can have, let's say, an element of like apples, and let's say oranges, lemons, and so forth, right? And these lists, right, they organize it within those brackets. So you can think of them as kind of like a group, right? And we're going to be using random to randomly pick one of those items inside there. Right? So string concatenation, if you think of string concatenation as kind of like a puzzle, right? You have puzzle pieces, right? And you put them together by sticking the correct pieces in a certain way, right? So you can think of concatenation kind of like that. String concatenation, what it does is that it gets bits and pieces of, it could be anything. We can get different pieces of text, we can get different numbers, or we can get other things. And concatenation, what we'll do is we'll combine it to make it something bigger, right? And for example, you can take words or sentences and you can put them together using the plus sign to create longer sentences. So it's, think of it as kind of like building with Legos. You're taking these different blocks, right? And you're attaching it together with plus signs. So when we're talking about string concatenation, think of using the plus sign for that. Appending. Appending is, in some ways, what we're going to be using appending for is similar to concatenation, but it's also kind of different. Appending, you can think of it as kind of like adding a new book to your bookshelf, right? So why am I explaining it that way? In Python, let's say you have a list, right? And in that list, right, that array, right, what we want to do is we want to add something to it, right? And so we say we want to add this to my list, and what we do is we use the append function. The way that it works, it's like this. We do dot append, like so. Okay, we're going to use that specific function. And what it's going to do is that it's going to add it to the end of our list. And every time we use append, we're going to keep adding it more and more to our new list to create a brand new list in that manner. All right, so you can think of string concatenation and appending our strings in a very similar manner. All right, and we're going to do it both ways so that you can see how they both work. All right, you could think of functions. You can think of functions as kind of like recipes. You can think of them as like cooking recipes. And so with cooking recipes, right, you have the name of the recipe, right? That would be the name of the function, right? And then within the recipe card or page, right, you're going to have a list of instructions. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, get 3/4 of this. Step 4, do this with this, and so forth, right? So a function, what it does is that it gets the set of instructions, which we call an algorithm, and puts it inside of a box. And you can use that function in not just one programming, file. You can use it in many different apps, because a function in Python can be used in many different applications. As long as they're Python, it will allow you to get that function and use it anywhere. Kind of like if you decide to copy the recipe and give it to somebody else, now you and another person have that recipe. Functions are the same way. So functions, you can think of them as a block of instructions, right, that can be utilized anywhere in your application. And all you have to do is just call that function, and I'll show you how to do that tonight. Lastly, let's think of for loops. For loops are a way of what we call iterating or performing a certain set of instructions a certain number of times. Okay? And maybe we want to do some counting and perform some steps 10 times, right? And we want to make sure that it happens only 10 times, not less than 10, not more than 10, but up to 10 times. We can use a for loop for that, and it will allow us to perform those instructions within a given range of attempts or times to make sure that we get the proper output that we want, right? Oh, and one more thing I want to make sure that we add on here, which is join. We're going to be joining strings together as well. You can think of join as kind of like getting a bunch of words or phrases and connecting them with a special type of glue. You can think of join, which is the function, as a glue. All right, it's a function, and what it does is that it helps you take items from a list and stick them together with a chosen separator. So we can determine how these strings are going to be attached to each other and what's going to be in between each of those strings. Right? Usually we'll use like an empty space to determine that. Right? So this is useful when you have a bunch of different parts of a sentence and you want to put them together in one long sentence, and it makes it easier to work with. All right. So enough talk about all of these things. Let's go ahead and start trying to apply this in an actual program. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import the random module, and the way you just do that is just type import random, and that's it. Now we have the random module available for us to go ahead and randomly select our parts of our excuses. Now, we're going to need to have different parts of the excuse. Think of a sentence having different parts to it, right? And so we're going to use lists for that. We'll have a list of components for excuses here. And I'm going to have 3 of them. I'm going to have the excuse starters, right? I'm going to have excuse reasons. And I'm going to have excuse endings. So there are 3 lists there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and attach some excuses inside of it. Right? So we're going to add elements or items inside of each of these lists here. Right? So how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we'll just start typing the first string in here. So let's say I'm sorry, but. Okay. There's our first string. That's our first element. And we separate our elements or our items inside these lists with commas. Now we can go ahead and add another starter. And it should be a sentence starter with a capital letter. All right, let's do another one. Make it a string. Let's do one more. Let's do due to unforeseen circumstances, which is personally my favorite. And you can add a trailing comma in there if you want. That's perfectly acceptable in Python, but you don't have to. All right, let's put some excuse reasons here. All right, so we have our starters. I'm sorry, but unfortunately, I regret. Now we come to the heart of the excuse, right? So the heart of the excuse should be what you want to say happen. So we can start with the ubiquitous one, which is my dog ate my homework, right? Only imagine if that excuse is in other countries besides the United States. I would find that hilarious. My alarm didn't go off. That's a good one, right? That one definitely everyone has said before at one point or another. What's another one? Heavy traffic, right? No capital, because this is the middle of the sentence, right? There was heavy traffic on my way. Sudden family emergency, right? Let's add one more in here. My computer crashed and I lost all my work. Oh, brother. All right, so notice that we're getting the different parts of our sentences here, right? Finally, with excuse endings, this is going to provide what you weren't able to accomplish, right? Got it. There you go. Hopefully that helps. All right, so now there are the endings. So let's start with, let's see, couldn't complete the task on time, right? We have something which led to the delay. Remember, our endings have to have punctuation. Let's have something like resulting in my inability to meet the deadline. Last one, causing me to miss out on the important event. Hopefully everyone's ever able to see it now. I know that there's some people that are saying that they were using mobile to help them, so I've gone ahead and increased the text size. Hopefully it's clearer now. For anyone who's on mobile. Thank you, Diane, for addressing that. All right, so now that I have my different parts of my excuses, I can go ahead and start generating random selections of each of my lists and assigning it to a new variable, right? That will be the variable that holds the selected item in each of those lists, so that I can then put them together. So let's generate the random excuse. And what we'll do is I'll have something like random starter, which will be the holder of the excuse starters. I'll have random, let's say reason, to hold the selected reason, and random ending to hold the selected ending. And now this is where the random module comes in. At this point now, I can use what we call random.choice what random.choice will do is that it will pick one of these elements inside of each of my lists here. So for random starter, I want to randomly choose one from my excuse starters. So inside the parentheses, I'm going to add excuse starters as the argument. And now I can do the same thing for random reason. I'm going to do random.choice. I'm going to put on here excuse reason. Okay, reasons. And then finally random.choice. I'm going to put in here excuse endings. Now each of my three variables here will be assigned one of these parts of the sentences in each of the lists. So now that I have that, now I'm going to concatenate, right, the parts to form the final excuse. So we're going to create another variable called final excuse. And now we're going to put random starter, right, plus, and then of course we're going to add a single space in between each of them. You have to make sure that you do that when we're concatenating. Otherwise, some words will stick together with other words. Random reason. Plus random ending. Now with that information concatenated and assigned to final excuse, now we can go ahead and print the excuse. So we'll put a print statement on here, terminal. And we'll put on here generating excuse. And this doesn't really need a new line, but because every time you use the print command, it prints on a new line. And then we're going to put in the final excuse on here. Okay. Now, the bottom half of your page here, we click run, cross your fingers, and you hope for the best, right? And if there's any errors, we fix it. So we'll click run. And here I get an error. It says random start is not defined. So let me go up here and let me find. I put random starter. So let me change that to random start. Run it again. And now we have a generated excuse. It says, due to unforeseen circumstances, my computer crashed and I lost all of my work, so I couldn't complete the task on time. Boom. And then if you want to run it again, you go ahead and just click the run button again. It should give you a different excuse every single time. I find this to be a very good little application just to learn how to work with random, work with lists, and work with strings. Does anyone have any questions on this first one? Please make sure to add it to the chat, because we're going to go ahead and advance this a little bit more.
I do, like, you can do the string concatenation like in JavaScript, right? Like the F string. Like you have a F, and then you just put like the
On
parentheses inside.
JavaScript, I'm not sure. I
No,
know
no,
on
here, like
but
where you
yes,
said final excuse.
yes,
Oh, okay.
yes, absolutely. But right now, really, I'm focusing on using concatenation first and appending, and then we can definitely focus on F strings in
Can you,
another. Yes,
can
go
you,
ahead.
can you please scroll up a bit? Because I was coding alongside with you.
Of course.
To get the final part. Yeah, right there. The last, the generate the random excuses. Can I see?
Okay.
All right, thank you. So it ends on line 33.
No, it does not end on line 33. It actually ends on line 36 because we have to print the excuse to the screen.
All right, let me just get that part. 1 second.
No problem. Take your time. So while some of you are just finishing this up, let me go ahead and give you a brief explanation of what occurred here. Okay. Well, first, we import the random module to generate random numbers. We defined our 3 lists, right? The excuse starters, the excuse reasons, and the excuse endings. And each of them contain different components of the excuses. We went ahead and used random.choice right here in lines 27, 28, and 29 to select a random element from each of those 3 lists. We concatenated these randomly selected parts using the string concatenation plus symbol, right? And stored them in the final excuse variable. And then finally, of course, we print the excuse onto the terminal. All right. Is everyone okay? Donald, are you good?
Yeah, I'm having one error on line 34 for my. Can I share my screen so you can see?
Absolutely. Yes. Go ahead. Of course. Let's see here. Random choice.
He has indented the code after the
Correct.
excuse ending. All you
Yeah.
have to do is remove the tab.
Say that one
Do
more
me,
time.
do me a favor. This is what I want you to do. I want you to highlight lines 33 through line 43, all of them, from line 33 to line 43, all the way to the bottom. Yes. Hold down the Shift key and press Tab. There you go. Now run it again. There you go.
Thank you.
Yes, Python deals with indentations. That's how they work with their code blocks. So yeah, you have to be careful with your indenting. All right. This is not like JavaScript. JavaScript doesn't care, but Python does.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. All right, let's go ahead and make this a little bit more interactive now, right? So let me go ahead and fix that there. All right. So let's add a function here to do all the processing for us.
Can you
right?
hear me, Rick?
Yes, I can hear you. Was there something you needed to say?
Can you hear me? No, I'm trying to mute myself through my mic. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. So like I was saying, we're going to go ahead and create a function now that's going to incorporate a lot of these instructions, right? And we're going to call that function now to help us generate the random excuse. We're also going to add a little bit of input here where the user will select how many excuses they want to have generated, whether it's just one excuse or 5 excuses, whatever. Okay. And to do that, we're going to use a for loop in order to accomplish that. So let's go ahead and get that started. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to work on the random excuses here, the generating the random excuses, and the final excuse portion here. Right? So all of this is going to eventually go into a function here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into line 25 here. I'm going to just give myself some space. I've just pushed the code down. And I'm going to go ahead and declare a function. And the way you declare a function in Python is by using the def keyword. And we're going to call this generate excuse because that's what it's going to do for us. So now we have our function declared with a name. Okay. And now we got to go ahead and provide in the function body the steps needed in order to accomplish that. Well, the steps needed in order to accomplish that are these steps from lines 34 to line 40. So I'm going to go ahead and push everything back up now, right above the generate excuse. Okay. Now, like I finished saying with Donald, and this was a good segue into functions, everything in Python deals with indentation. So if you're declaring a function, you have to make sure that the algorithms or the steps involved are indented into the function. Right? What does that mean? That means that these lines right here, where we're generating the random excuse and we're concatenating the parts of the excuse together, need to be indented in order to tell Python that, hey, we want to make sure that these instructions are within our function body. So highlight all of them and just hit tab once, and it should tab in. And then that's it. Okay. The only thing we have to do left now is return the final excuse. Right? We're creating the final excuse, but we still have to return it. And now we have a function that is ready to be utilized in this application by calling generate excuse. This print excuse section here, I'm going to delete this because this is going to be looking a little bit differently. All right. Now we're right after the return statement. We want to make sure that we're starting all the way at the beginning of the new line here. So I'm going to move down, and I want to make sure that I'm not indented. I should be on the same line as where the D is in the def. It should be at the same spot. That's telling me that I'm now outside of my function. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called number of excuses, or num excuses, that's going to ask the user how many excuses that they want us to generate. Okay. So the way we work on getting user input is by using the input function here. And inside the input function, we put a string in there. So we can say enter the number of excuses to generate. I'm going to put a colon on there and a little space because I want to make sure that the user has some space between my instructions and their input. Now, this right now isn't going to work, okay? Because what I want is an actual number. In Python, when we're using our input here, it's going to always input as a string. But I don't want to use a string. I want to use a number. So what I need to do is wrap this input into another function called int, for integer. What that's going to do is that it's going to allow us to convert the number, which will be a string that the user is inputting, and change it into an actual numerical value. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to wrap everything, right? I'm going to wrap everything in parentheses here. And then in front of that, I'm going to use the int function keyword there. So now num excuse will receive an actual numerical value instead of a string representation of the number. So we're going to call this user input customization. Now we're going to generate and print excuses in bulk. That we're going to use a for loop. Okay. So first things first, we're still going to print generating excuses or generated excuses. And now we're going to use the for loop. So under here, we're going to type the keyword for. We're going to use an underscore, and I'll explain to you what that means in a minute. In range num excuses. This for loop that's being generated here, right, is going to loop within however many excuses the user is choosing. So if the user chooses one, only one excuse will be looped through, or the loop will only work one time. If it's 5, it will do it 5 times. Okay, and every time it repeats itself, it's going to create a new excuse. So the range basically is saying do it from I believe it's from 0 to 1 less that number. Yadian, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's from 0 to 1 less that number. And the underscore here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay. Thank you. The underscore here, right? We could put a variable in here if we wanted to, but we don't have to because all we want to do is just repeat the process inside the body of the for loop. So we use this, the underscore, when I don't care about assigning a variable to anything. I want to just repeat the process over and over and over again. So we use that that under loop in our that underscore in our for loop. Now, inside the for loop, just like any other function, right, we have to indent in order to create our algorithm here. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to create a variable excuse, and then we're going to call the generate excuse function. Now remember, the generate excuse function is going to perform all the random selections of the different lists, right? Concatenate everything into a final excuse, and then return that final excuse and assign it to our excuse variable here. Once our excuse variable has received the output of generate excuse, we're going to print that excuse. And I'm going to go ahead and make some sort of separation here. So this is a little something that if you're working with Python, is one way you can separate things or separate sentences. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to create 40 dashes. And this will be a separator for easier readability, or for better readability, actually. Go from 0 to 99? Oh, okay. All right, let's go ahead and test it out, and let's see if we get any errors. Correct them, and we'll go ahead and try it again. So it's asking us to generate the number of excuses that we want. Let's do 2. We'll hit enter. We get an error here. It says num excuses is not defined. So let me find here. It's on line 41. And, because it's num excuse. It should not be num excuses. So I'm going to erase the S here. Make sure that the variable is exactly the same. And then we'll try it again. Enter the number of excuses to generate, 2. And now we're getting 2 generated excuses being printed out. And if I want to do 5, I can do 5. If I want to do 10, I can do 10. We'll run it again. Let's do 5. And now I got 5 excuses being generated on here. Any questions so far?
I do have a question. You didn't add there. My code is a little different, but you got the same result as me. But you didn't add the new line. How is it creating a new line? I'm confused there.
Creating a new line where generate excuses is at?
No, like when the text ends, it goes down, creates a new line, goes down.
You mean the excuse and then the new line, the excuse and then the new line?
Yes. Oh, you have.
Because I'm
Okay, you
using
have
print.
a. Oh, you have two different prints. Okay, no, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
no, yeah, I have them separate. Yes.
Okay.
Rick Martin has a question.
Go ahead, Martin. How do we get it to print when using VS Code? That's a great question. For VS Code,
Is the same.
yeah, it should be. No, the way you run it is you would run the. It should be Python 3 or Python. It should be either Python 3, and then the application name. So something like this should be how it should run.
He should share your screen because it just varies
Yeah, it would be easier.
depends on his setup. It just
Yeah,
varies
let's do
depends on
that.
setup.
Go ahead, Mark. You can share your screen so I can see. It won't let you share.
Just to allow him.
That's a good question. I'm not sure which. If you're just doing a. Oh, okay. It's fine. We can take a look at it afterwards. That's fine too. Right. I do teaching for a living, so
Yeah,
you know.
he should also have like a play button on the top right, and VS Code should select the default Python environment. So it
Could
should
be that.
work
Yeah.
if you click the play button on the top right on your VS Code, it should work.
All right. We'll take a look at that at the end here. Let me go ahead and bring this back here. All right. So everything so far we've talked about is dealing with the importing, list creation, concatenation, functions, and printing based upon how many excuses the user wants. The last thing I want to touch on is how to use append and join in order to create a final excuse with those methods. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to scroll back up here to generate excuse here. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this a little bit here. So I'm going to remove this code. And by all means, if you want to open up another online Python IDE to do this and have two separate ways of doing it, you're more than welcome to. Remember, this is also recorded, so you can always come back to this later if you'd like. So in our function, again, make sure that you're indented so that it runs properly. Otherwise, Python will complain. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an empty array called excuse parts. And inside excuse parts, I'm going to use the random choice for each of the three lists and append into my excuse parts array. So how do I do that? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use excuse parts at append. So, and inside I'm going to randomly choose each excuse portion from each of those lists. So this will be repeated 3 times, what I have on line 28. And that's great because since excuse parse is a list, it gets a set of functions that I can utilize and take advantage of. So inside here, I'm going to do random.choice. Again, I'll choose excuse starters. And then I'll do excuse underscore parts dot append. I'll do random dot choice. Excuse reasons. This is starters, yes. And then I'm going to do excuse parts and random choice excuse endings. And what that's going to do is it's going to add on to the end of the list one starter, one reason, and one ending in that order. So the sentence will be in part still, but it will be in the correct order that I need in order to join them all together. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to return, right, the joined excuse. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the .join method, okay? And the way you do that is you determine what's going to separate each of those elements in my list. Excuse me, what's going to attach each of those elements in my list. It could be anything. It could be a letter. It could be an empty space. It could be a number. It could be whatever you want. In this case, I'm going to put an empty space. I'm going to use .join. And what this is going to do is it's going to say, okay, get the first element, put it in the string, separate it with this empty space that you told us to separate it with, then get the next string, attach it to that, then get the next part of that string after you put the space in and attach the ending to it. So it's going to be the starter with the space, the reasons with the space, and then the ending. And then you determine what array you want to use. In this case, we're going to use excuse parts to do our combining. And nothing else has to change. Just the function itself needs to change, but everything else can remain the same because the process is going to work within that function itself only. So once you have that, you can run it. And again, it should give you how many excuses you want to generate. And then it will generate those excuses as if you had concatenated them. But in this case, we are using append and join. Go ahead, Donald.
If you have to use like a comma to separate the excuses, what would the syntax look like?
Let's take a look. Let's try it out. Let's say we add a comma in there, like that. Let's run it. Now you'll see that every time we have the our string made, you can tell where each part is being connected because they're being connected with the comma at each part there. So I can change it to, let's say, an exclamation point. I run it. We do two of them this time, so it's easier to see. You'll see that the separator has an exclamation. There's the exclamation point there for the first one. Oh, and it keeps kicking me down. Here's the exclamation point here. Here's the exclamation point here. And for the second one, same thing. So you can think of it as the separator for you. All right?
Thank you.
Welcome. definitely suggest, if you want, you can open up a repo for this and add this to your repo in GitHub and have both of them on there just for reference's sake. It's good to have this, particularly for those of you that are already in the program. You may be working with Python on the back end in the web development, or you may be working in the data science, which is very Python heavy. And these arrays and these methods are very useful tools to accomplish the tasks that are needed for the developers and the users.
So how do you get to add it from here to your repository?
How do you get it from here to your repository? That's a great question. What you can do you have GitHub
Yes.
now? Okay, so if you go to GitHub, you would have to have a code spaces. If you have,
Yes, I do have code space.
if you got code spaces, then you can just copy the code onto there.
Oh, okay.
And then just push it like normal. So it's no different. The only reason why I'm using this IDE is just out of convenience for anyone that may be having problems with, let's say, code spaces, because I know sometimes code spaces gets a little finicky. And this one, I've used it in the past, and it's always been easy to use, and it's across different operating systems without it doesn't cause a problem since it's web based.
I was thinking there could be a way to push it from here to your repository from the IDE.
No.
So, no.
Yeah, no. This is just for the showing part of it. You would have to copy and paste the information onto either VS Code or onto something that can transfer this information to GitHub. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so this concludes our little workshop for tonight. I hope you got something out of it. There was a lot of different things that we were learning on, and if this is the first time you're using Python, you can see how intuitive it is. That's why a lot of beginners like to use Python, because of its simplicity and its elegance. And so I appreciate everyone coming in here tonight, and I look forward to the next workshop, and I hope to see you then. So that's it, folks.
Thank you, Rick. Amazing workshop.
Oh, you're welcome.
And also, do we get access to this video?
Janet, I think this is on YouTube once we're done here, correct?
Soon, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, let me see. Oh, no, you're welcome, everyone. You're welcome. It was a pleasure having you all here.
Good job,
and I
Rick.
hope out of it, man. Oh, thank you so much, Ernie. I appreciate it. And so have a great night, folks. And we'll see you next time.
Have a good night. Thanks for everything, Rick. That was a good
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for coming.
one.
Good night, everyone.